When I was in high school, I remember secretly listening to Coldplay, thanks to that joke from the 40-Year-Old Virgin.
You like Coldplay.
A lot of men aren't comfortable with other men who appreciate good, raw, creative expression of the human experience. But this doesn't really impact my musical tastes like it used to when I was a teenager. I'm sharing my thoughts and feelings about Coldplay on the internet. One of my favorite things about this band is how they haven't got stuck in a genre rut. They've done a lot of experimenting on the last few albums, and it'd be very easy for them to just sort of stick with the safety of the artistically done pop top 40s thing they had going on. So what comes next with the release of their new double album, Everyday Life? Let's get into my review. Welcome, friendly humans of the internet. If this is your first time here, be sure to subscribe to this channel for your regular dose of positivity on things a lot of people think suck. Not that I think a lot of people think Coldplay sucks, but I do blame the 40-Year-Old Virgin for any negative societal perception of this band. So Everyday Life opens much like everyday life does in real life, with the Sunrise. Sunrise is a string-based instrumental track that's perfectly enjoyable, but overall, I just kind of felt like it was a little bit skippable, mostly because I think the second track, entitled Church, could also serve as a good album opener. There's some nice classic Coldplay instrumentation and a strong chorus hook that'll definitely keep me coming back to listen to this one on repeat. I don't think there are any inherently religious connotations to the lyrics, aside from the underlying metaphor that the subject of the song is a source of spiritual healing. To me, it seems to be kind of a reminder that we can use love to cleanse ourselves of all the sort of negative crap that goes on in the world, regardless of our race, gender, sexual orientation, or religious denomination. We're all human beings, and one of our basic survival needs is to feel some sort of attachment to other human beings. We often focus on our differences and how they separate us, while forgetting what makes us the same. And this is a theme that sort of is carried on throughout this album, so I think it's really fitting that this song serves as sort of the first non-instrumental track on the album. In contrast, Trouble in Town is a really bleak commentary on racial profiling. The song overall has this ambient sort of spooky vibe to it that's driven by this slow funk bass groove, which sets the stage for the conflict that this song is about. At the midway point, there's this explosive and striking interlude that contains a sample of a real-world profiling. The instrumentation here reminds me of something from Supertramp, like Crime of the Century or something. There's an orchestra of sorts over top of a pounding piano and an unstable sounding guitar lead. When I think about how this track is on an album entitled Everyday Life, I'm reminded that these haunting real-world events are part of some people's everyday realities. Onto a track called Daddy. As a father of a 3-year-old girl who just wants to play pirates and hospital and pretend trick-or-treating an entire month after Halloween, the lyrics of this track hit me so hard. I'm constantly being pulled towards work and just the distractions of everyday life. But the reality is, my daughter just needs me. We all have our struggles, but in the end, our children need us by their side to feel loved and safe. This one totally gutted me based on my own sort of interpretation of the narrative that's presented. The groove that's carried throughout Arabesque had me listening to this track on repeat from day one. The massive horn explosion in the middle really takes off out of nowhere into this like screaming whirlwind of brass, which is unlike anything I've ever heard on a Coldplay track. Plus, I'm also a sucker for French singing. Comme du l'essence qui se ressemble pour faire le grand rivière. Guns is an honest commentary on gun violence and segregation with some tasty acoustic work and seriously awesome and well-placed F-bombs that give this tune a really raw and authentically pissed off vibe. I really like this song. I often find myself humming the chorus to Orphans, but I really wish that they would have omitted the singing children choir. I find the melody strong enough without it, and the message about the Syrian civil war is well conveyed. I just find myself distracted from the effectiveness of the chorus without Chris Martin's vocals at the forefront. There is some awesome harmonization in the third chorus, but I really wish they would have just went with layered vocals instead. Now, this is a minor criticism that doesn't really take away from the song overall, and I'll probably get over it. The song Echo has a nice melody that's repeated throughout, and I can see the song really growing on me and becoming a nice listen during a late, quiet night with a hot cup of tea. Children of Adam feels like a two-part instrumental. It begins with this piano piece, which completely goes silent halfway through, at which point a new theme's introduced by the whole band with a Persian spoken word poem over top. It's different and artistic, and it's definitely worth listening to, especially when the translation is consistent with the central theme of the album. Human beings are members of a whole, in creation of one essence and soul. I have a personal story I can share about the first time I heard the title track, Everyday Life. So my cat had just woken me up at 4:30 in the morning. After my daughter had kept me up late, I was just in a horrible mood, and I knew that I was going to let this wreck my day. On an album about social injustice across the world, it sounds petty, I know, but I happened to check this track out, and it totally changed the course of my day. We all go through a bunch of crap in our lives, and we all feel that our struggles are greater than other people's struggles. But no matter what, it's not an excuse to be jerk to other people, especially when we stack our struggles up against the everyday lives of people around the world, some of which are described in detail throughout this album. This was an incredible album closer, which really ties these themes together effectively. As for criticisms, I often find double albums to feel a little bit unnecessary. Many are artistic concept albums which require 2 albums worth of material to flesh out some sort of theme that's repeated throughout. However, we often end up with a large chunk of filler that could be omitted to trim the double album into one really awesome single album. I do partially feel like that's the case with Everyday Life, but it listens well as a cohesive piece of art, so people that enjoy spinning a good vinyl or just digesting an album in one sitting will probably appreciate the body of work that is this album. Now, there are a few tracks on this album which I think really just serve to bridge the gap between other songs on the album in order to tie the theme of the double album together nicely. Broken is a gospel church type hymn that warms my soul and makes me just want to be a good person. But I don't see myself listening to this as a go-to Coldplay track. It works well as part of the overall theme of the concept album, but it's not really one I plan on going back to. When I Need a Friend is beautiful lyrically and has this reverby, ascending hymn vibe to it. But when stacked up against the other Coldplay songs, even those that are on this album, it's not really recognizable as a Coldplay song. These tracks aren't bad by any means, I just don't see myself listening to them very often and would consider them skippable. As far as mediocre and just kind of meh goes, Old Friends has some neat guitar work and folk influences, and Cry 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 is a bluesy, chugging piano tune, but neither of these were really dynamic enough to hold my attention. The acronym song, WOTWBOTW, is a raw, demo-feeling acoustic track that mostly feels like a prelude to Arabesque. Lastly, the main intro theme that's repeated throughout Champion of the World is quite repetitive and simplistic, and I found myself quite tired of it by the time I heard it for the second time. But there are some standout moments in this song, in particular the bridge and the final chorus, that did grab me. I just don't plan on really listening to the song that often. Overall, Everyday Life is a collection of tracks that makes me want to be a better husband and father and just human being in general. This is done by painting a very vivid picture of what people are going through in the world today. And this sounds kind of like a cliche theme for a double album in 2019, but it's very effectively and artistically done. It's an impressive task for a body of work to make the listener feel a sense of balance between introspection and connectedness to the world around them. I felt like I was doing some soul searching on a personal level while I was listening to a lot of these tracks, which was contrasted to the feeling of culture and global awareness of struggles that people around the world are facing. This was a very effective concept that I thought was very well fleshed out on this album. Having said that, I don't necessarily think that this warrants 2 discs worth of material to form a double album. If I'm looking at this album from a track-by-track perspective, there is a good percentage of what could be considered filler or mediocre or skippable tracks, especially when stacked up against some of the gems on this album. I only found myself really invested in about 8 out of 16 of the tracks. There were about 5 that were just kind of there for me, but I know Coldplay fans will probably find value in those. But I found 3 of them to be very skippable to the point where I won't listen to them unless I'm listening to this entire album as a whole. But for its balance between personal and global themes, the inspiring and uplifting messages contrasted with the bleak and harsh realities of humanity, I can overlook the sense that the double format feels home to skippable or mediocre tracks to give Everyday Life by Coldplay a 4 out of 5. What do you guys think? Share your thoughts in the comments, and for goodness sake, remember to be kind to your fellow humans.